80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule, the law of the vital few, states that for many events, roughly 80% of the results come from 20% of the efforts. Conversely, the remaining 20% of the results come from 80% of the efforts. This rule was postulated by Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto. He observed in 1897 that 80% of the land in England was owned by 20% of the population. Surprisingly, it was true for many other countries as well. 20% of the pea pods in his garden contained 80% of the peas. Based on these observations, he formulated what is called the Pareto principle. There are some other examples of the Pareto principle. 80% of sales typically come from 20% of clients. 80% of the world's wealth is controlled by 20% of the population. 20% of patients use 80% of healthcare services. 20% of workers produce 80% of the output. 20% of bugs in a software system cause 80% of the crashes. 80% of users use 20% of features of any product. It takes 20% effort to complete the first 80% of a project. The remaining 20% of work takes 80% of effort. Pareto rule in inventory. Let us now explore how the Pareto rule is applicable in the case of inventory. Typically, 80% of an operation's sales are accounted for by only 20% of all stocked item types. This relationship can be used to classify the different types of items kept in an inventory by their usage value. This is also called ABC analysis or ABC stock control. ABC inventory control allows inventory managers to concentrate their efforts on controlling the more significant items of stock. ABC classification. The Pareto rule has been applied to this classification called ABC classification with a slight modification. A category items constitute 10% of the total number of materials and contribute to 70% of the total value of inventory. B category items constitute approximately 20% of total materials and contribute to 20% of the total value. C category items are the most numerous and constitute 70% of the total number of materials and contribute to only 10% of the total value. ABC analysis. Let us refer to the table above. Class A items constitute approximately 10% of the number of items in inventory, and their value typically ranges from 70 to 80% of the total value of inventory. Class B ranges from between 11 to 20% of the items in inventory, and their value ranges from between 10 to 20% of the total inventory value. The last category, Class C, make up 70 to 80% of the items in inventory, and their value is only between 5 to 10% of the total inventory value. By clearly identifying the high value or A class items, this allows purchase managers to focus their efforts on areas which will have the maximum impact onto the organization. Pareto analysis. The graph shows how the Pareto analysis or ABC analysis can be depicted pictorially. On the x-axis, we have the cumulative percentage of items. On the y-axis, we have the cumulative percentage of use by value. As can be seen from the graph, a few items contribute to a high percentage of usage by value, and there are many items which are the C class items which contribute to only a small percentage of usage by value. The Pareto rule. The ABC analysis puts items into different categories to show the amount of effort that is worth spending on inventory control of these items. 20% of the items need 80% of the attention, while the remaining 80% of the items need only 20% of the attention. How is this useful to purchase managers? By doing an inventory classification of items into A, B, and C, A class items need very tight control and accurate documentation. B class items need to be controlled slightly less and need good documentation. C class items, on the other hand, need the simplest controls possible and minimal documentation. Classify items. The first step in ABC analysis is to classify all items in inventory either as A, B or C. The first step is to calculate the value for each item, that is the cost into the annual demand or the annual usage. Second step, the items are ranked according to their annual value in a descending order. The third step, the items are classified as follows. The top 10% are classified as A items, the next 20% of items are classified as B items, and the last 70% of items are classified as C items. These classifications will not be exact, but they have been found to be close to the actual percentage in practical terms. A-class items. Once we have classified the items, the next step is to determine the level of inventory control required for each classification. A-class items require a tight inventory control as they represent a large percentage of the total value of inventory. The inventory levels of A-class items should be kept as low as possible with minimum safety stocks. A-class items also require accurate forecasts and detailed record keeping and documentation. A-class items also need appropriate inventory control systems and cost-effective procedures to determine the order quantities. In addition, close attention should be given to the purchasing policies and procedures for managing A-class items. B and C-class items. B and C-class items require less stringent inventory control. Since carrying costs are usually lower for C-class items, higher inventory levels can sometimes be maintained with larger safety stocks. It may not be necessary to control C-class items beyond simple observation techniques. Monitoring. In general, A-class items are frequently monitored and they require a continuous control system. B-class items require monitoring at a lesser frequency. A periodic review system with occasional monitoring will be sufficient for C-class items. ABC classification example. Let us look at an example of ABC classification. A small and medium enterprise buys materials worth Rs 26 crores every year. If we were to do an ABC analysis of the items purchased by the company, the table below shows how it would appear. The company has totally 898 items. Out of approximately 900 items, around 90 items, that is 10%, contribute to more than 72% of the annual purchase value. These items are classified as A items. The next 180 items, which are 20% of the number of items, contribute to about 18% of the annual purchase value. Therefore, these are classified as B items. The last group of 628 items, which is nearly 70%, make up less than 10% of the total inventory value. These are therefore classified as C items. How does the usage of the ABC analysis help the purchase manager of this company? As can be seen from the table, a smaller number of items contribute to a large amount of value. Therefore, the purchase manager can spend more time in planning and managing A-class items, and then less time in the B-class and the many C-class items. Since A-class items are higher in value, lower levels of inventory should be maintained of such items. They are also ordered and reviewed very frequently, and very often they are monitored by special buyers. B-class items are ordered and reviewed less frequently than A-class items, and moderate levels of inventory are carried of such items. Although it is important to provide necessary supply of all items, there are some common purchasing techniques that can be used to manage C-class items. These include keeping slightly higher levels of inventory, having a few suppliers to manage multiple items, allowing the end user to directly manage ordering, and reviewing the items infrequently. By doing so, this reduces the paperwork and the transaction cost of purchasing these items. And since their value is typically low, slightly higher levels of inventory that may result will not impact the organization.